Hey, welcome to the Let's Talk Paralegal podcast. It's an honor to have you. We had a little discussion before, so I'm excited to hear what you have to say.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So you brought up a really good topic that I think the audience is going to really benefit from, and then we can later on talk about like what you actually do on a day to day, other than doing podcast interviews, and just being an awesome person in general. But you talk about data and how we use it and how it affects everyone, right? Not just legal professionals, but everyone in general. So tell us a little bit about what that looks like and kind of where it's headed.
Yeah, so um, uh, pre 9/11, and a lot of people may not know this, but pre 9/11, September 11th, right? So pre 9/11, about half of employers in America did background checks, and this was not necessarily your kind of your comprehensive background check, but it was like, let's see if this person, who's applying to work at a bank actually robbed a bank before, right? Or let's see if this person who, you know, had some, well, the sex offender is trying to work at a school, right? It just made sense. And then about, 3 to 4 out of 10 landlords did background checks, right? It was like, I want to make sure this person that's moving into my house is not going to terrorize my house, right?
Right.
Post 9/11, what you had was, I don't know if you remember, but there was no TSA pre 9/11.
Oh
Like
my God. You
there,
remember those days and when we had food in the plane, like when we had like real food? You remember that?
yeah,
Now we
yeah.
pay double
So
the price and we get water. Nice.
exactly,
Okay,
right,
thanks.
exactly. And so there was no so post 9/11, there's a proliferation of background checks. So today, 90% of landlords and 90% of employers do background checks. We also, so I want to put a pin in that, right? I'm going to come back to that. Pre 1950, I'm going all the way back now, like
Oh
rewinding.
wow. Okay.
Yeah, take it
Okay.
back to clock.
Yeah.
Pre
Let's do it.
1950, the American economy was a manufacturing economy, right?
Mhm.
And it was more or less like learn on the job. Post 1950, we became occupational licensing. So pre 1950 and service, right? More about service and very skilled labor. And so like pre 1950, only 5% of the American economy in terms of jobs were regulated by occupational licensing. Post 1950, 25%, right? And so, while a lot of the jobs, like, so 75% of the jobs you don't need a license for, and that's still today. It's kind of creeping up now with skilled labor. You kind of need some sort of training prior to you getting a job. So
Right.
couple those two things, right? So you have about a one out of three, 1 out of 4 jobs requiring a license,
Right.
and the rest of the jobs, most jobs require you to go through a background check, right? Now think about all the people that, like, juxtapose that to folks who went through the criminal justice system,
Mm.
right? So people with criminal records. Contrary to popular belief, there's a lot of people in America with criminal records, more than you think, right?
Right.
There's
Yeah.
80 million, 80 million. And these
Yeah.
are people that had a run-in with the law, right? So it's, and 92.8% of people that currently have a criminal record have already served their time. So they exited the deepest end of the justice system. So they're not in jail and, in prison, on probation or on parole or any community supervision. No, they
They're
got
done.
in, yeah, they got in trouble and they're done. They're living their life. They're, they're moms and dads and they got kids and, they're just
They're
done.
trying. Mm-hmm.
They're trying. And so there's 80 million of those folks. So just put into context that number.
Right.
80 million people, right, is
Mm-hmm.
twice the size of Canada. So
Yes.
it's like so everybody, you take everybody in Canada and you put them into like Texas, and then you clone them, right? That's the amount of
Yeah.
people that has criminal records in America. It's about like 1 in 4, 1 in 5. So it's a lot of people that had a run-in with the law, but most folks moved on. unfortunately, there's something called collateral consequences. So it's a term that is not widely known in the general public, but it's called collateral consequences. And these are not the direct consequence of having like getting in trouble with the law, like either, you know, you go to jail
like
or
you have to
prison
serve or do probation, right?
or whatever fines and fees or restitution you have to pay. These are the legal restrictions that happen afterwards, right?
Yeah.
And there are about 40,000 of them. So like 40,000 little
I didn't know there was that
laws.
many.
Yeah,
Wow.
40,000 little laws that essentially stop people from getting jobs or housing or education. Now, when you break these things down, right, it's not just one or two jobs, right? It's all of the licensing professions. So 25% of the economy you're shut out of. So healthcare, government, finance, education, people are completely shut out of, right? And this is for folks who have more, like people with a felony, right? And felonies can be a burglary when you're 18. Most people commit felonies when they're like 18, 19, and now they're like 40 and they still can't get jobs, right? It's because, you know, even though they're done with their sentence and they moved on, these 40,000 legal restrictions are attached to the 25% of the economy. Remember that have license that require a license, and then 9 out of 10 jobs because of, you know, the background check companies, you know, deny people because they have a criminal record.
Right.
Put a pin in that.
Yeah.
So that's a problem because
let's digest that for a second.
Yeah, that's a problem because it's the reason why people with criminal records are just they're not even criminal. They're just like people with a legal record in their past, right? You know, their unemployment is 5 times the national average. So that the national average is stubbornly at like 5.7% or whatever. They're at 27%. Right.
Oh, and just to be clear, even though they're expunging it or sealing it, it'll still reflect on a background check that you have something sealed or expunged.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know that. So I'm gonna put it out there for anyone that was wondering, oh, well, if I get it expunged or sealed, won't it? No, it doesn't limit you just to like government jobs or anything like that. Like intense background check will show that you have something it won't show specifically what it is, but it will show that something was either sealed or expunged at times, especially depending on your jurisdiction. It may even show what it is. So, and depending on how deep dive the background check is. So FYI for anyone that's listening or watching.
Yep. I was getting into that because that's a super important about the date. I want to like underscore that. So just imagine, right, these 80 million people, let's say about half of them have a felony record. So about 40 million people that are really acutely tied to this line of data. And this line of data has nothing to do with them currently. Like a lot of, like most folks have been out an average of 6-7 years. And the data shows, like the science shows, if a person is out living crime-free for over 5 years, they are just as likely to commit a crime as someone that never committed it ever. Right. So these folks aren't committing crimes. Like these aren't like your ex-con criminal or what. No, this is not the movies, folks. This is real life. People do dumb stuff when they're kids. Most people move on, right? They also experience housing issues as well, because, you know, 9 out of 10 landlords do background checks, right? So think about it, right? You have these huge communities in cities that are shut off from people with felony convictions, or people with an old criminal record, right? Because they can't live anywhere. So you have not only are they shut off from the American economy, they can't work in large portions of the society, healthcare, government, education, finance, all these major growth sectors, and then 25% of the licensing, right? But they also can't live in areas that do all the rental properties do background checks. So all these rental properties in suburban neighborhoods, they can't live in, you know, because they do background checks. So where do they go? They are forced to live in the same areas, and it's concentrated low income in those areas, right? Just to give you a picture of kind of like what is happening. And we're giving out 1 million felonies every year. So more and more people are getting felonies. And to your point, an expungement is only it's a legal remedy that is setting aside or dismissing a record, but it's not shielding a person from being able to see that record. Those records are expunged records are under the protection of FCRA, the Fair Credit Reporting Act, but they're not under the protection of fingerprint background checks, right? Which a lot of people are starting to do today, and all the licensed professions do fingerprint background checks, right? Correct. And so this is a problem because you have 1 in 4 Americans, 1 in 5 Americans that are living in what we call post-conviction poverty, which is essentially a person experiencing long-term financial insecurity, financial hardships due to an old criminal record because they're deemed ineligible for a wide range of housing, employment, and other economic opportunities, right? You also have post-conviction redlining, which people are, locked out of large portions of their city. So they're regulated to small portions of the city that they can rent in, and those cities and those portions are unsafe. And then you have those concentrated in those areas, right? And so, and we're doing that to 1 million people every single year. And if you try to get your record expunged, or you try to get a pardon or a certificate of rehabilitation, it still pops up on a lot of different background checks. And so while you may be able to go get a house in, a semi-safe neighborhood, you're not going to be able to afford the rent because you can't get that career because you need, you can't clear your record, right? And so that's happening to 1 million people every single year in America, and it's not there's no end in sight. So I just want to frame that for folks before we talk about data, because all of this, while we're having a conversation around the criminal justice system, it is literally just about data, right? Like none of it has anything to do with the person themselves, right? Like most people that commit crimes are between the ages of 16 and 24. And we know that when they reach 30 to 35, they age out of criminality. And then 35 to 40 and on, they're not committing any more crimes. They're done. They're just trying to figure life out. At that moment, there is no remedy for them to, the data to actually be consistent with, human, like what humans go through. And that's the problem with just using acute data without having it tied to the actual physiology of a person, right? And so we do this in the medical profession, and we do it well in the medical profession, right? We're like, hey, you wouldn't use my elementary immunization record to make a determination about my health and wellness when I'm 36 years old. You just wouldn't. Correct. Like, why would you say, oh, well, he had a cough when he was 6 years old, you know what I mean? And he had the chickenpox vaccination. Therefore, we need to give him Advil instead of Tylenol when he's 36. No, I'm physically different. I'm physically different, right? I don't even have the same eyebrows as I did when I was a kid. You know what I mean? And so why would you use data from when I was 19 years old to make a decision about where I can live when I'm 36? If by all accounts, all the other science says that I'm not that same person. And herein lies the problem with using data from the legal system to make decisions about how a person's supposed to live in society. And there's this concept there's this, and there's no rules for this. There's actually a constitutionality around people being able to see the data, right? It's the law is actually rooted in freedom of information act, and it's also rooted in freedom of press. Like the press can go and see this data. They can go and see legal records, right? And there's nothing to stop them. And so while that's constitutional, it's morally wrong, I believe, to use that and it's kind of like systematically wrong to use that and don't tie it to a person's how a person is then. The reason it's systematically wrong because the criminal justice system, the actual system that gave them a person that record, has nothing to do with the decision being made. Absolutely nothing.
Well, it's kind of like similarly what legal professionals do on a day-to-day, right? We review data, right? Which in our, I guess the world of a paralegal and attorney would be legal research, right? We look at prior cases and we kind of, grab all that information to create an argument, right? So law is all about interpretation. That's the whole purpose, right? Of law and legal professionals and what we do on a day-to-day basis is we interpret the law that is already there, or we strive, like you, to either change it or create new ones that are obviously make more sense. Another thing about the law that we should point out is that it takes forever for it to get updated, right? Because I always use a simple example for those that are not too familiar, but the cell phone laws. How long have cell phones been around? And I think Florida, like 5 years ago, finally got the first you can't talk on the phone while you're driving law. And it's like simple little things like that. Yeah. I think that we're so far behind and it takes so long for these laws to get caught up, and then back in the day, forget about it. It would take 10 to 11 years. Perfect example, Roe versus Wade, right? It took 10 years. She had to have the baby, regardless, because it took 10 years to make that decision. So to your point, I completely agree with that information, and I completely agree with that. We sometimes get it wrong. We sometimes interpret the law or the procedures in a way where it would benefit one person but not the other, and it's supposed to be we the people, right? It's supposed to benefit all of us.
Yeah, and for the fact of the matter is, I'm hard pressed to find. A justification, right? Why this exists, right? I like, so I've heard it all. It's like, oh, well, Jay, you don't want, someone that's a murderer working at a school. Look, the guys, or the women, took a life and, should pay for that, right? Definitely pay for that. And it should be up to the victims on what happens 100%. And if that person is out, the recidivism rate for people who commit murder is 0.
Okay.
The more violent the crime, like these violent crimes, right? Assault, battery, attempted murder, all these things are very, very, very violent in and of itself, right?
Correct.
The people themselves, when you meet them, are not violent individuals. They did something, like it was a situation that happened. So a lot of times, and this is again, why I think, data, legal system data is just not the right data to use in determining a person's disposition, for going into the system, and then what happens after they go out the system. I'll tell you why. When someone's arrested, right? And the police ask them, why did you do what you do? Why are the police asking them, why did they do what they do? Why did they do what they did? They're not asking because they want to get to the root cause of criminality. They're asking for an admission of guilt. And not one time does someone slow down and say, what was the underlying causes of you stealing that bike? I will guarantee that if you ask a person what was the underlying cause of why you stole that bike, the response was going to be, I'm trying to get from point A to point B, or I didn't have a bike to use, or I'm trying to get to school, I'm trying to get to the mall. It is a lack of resources. And so if that's the underlying causes of someone breaking the law or doing harm, then wouldn't we want to deal with the underlying causes of that? Instead, not lock this person up and make it harder for them to actually get resources so they can go to school or go to the mall or go see that girlfriend across town. Why would we make it harder for them to do the thing that actually caused them to commit the crime in the first place? It's actually backwards. And so using that already corrupt data about an individual's character, because in Hawker versus New York, right, in 1893, about the abortion case, when the doctor was trying to appeal the decision around should he lose his medical license, because he, so for those of you who don't know what Hawker versus New York is,
I was gonna say, explain it to them.
yeah, it was a court case in New York. A doctor committed he did an abortion. It was illegal at the time. He went to jail, served his time, got out, continued to practice medicine. Years later, about 10 years later, they passed a law in the state of New York saying that anyone with a felony can no longer practice medicine. Well, he was arrested again because he was practicing medicine. He was like, wait a minute, I already served my time for that. This is ex post facto. You can't arrest me for that. He's appealed up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, wait a minute, the fact that a part of their decision was around, the collateral consequence of him losing his license. They said that the fact that you committed a crime was mere evidence that you've been a bad moral character. Therefore, we don't want your kind practicing medicine ever again. So herein lies the problem with that. You are making a decision about a person's character based on a moment in time. A lot of folks.
Meanwhile, he probably had no medical malpractice. He probably never had anything disciplinary.
100%, right? So just imagine all the people that committed 1 or 2 crimes in their life, broke the law 1 or 2 times, right? They get a long sentence and they're labeled with this, you're a murderer or you're attempted murderer. And it's like this person only picked up a gun because they were scared and ended up shooting somebody, or he hopped in a car and robbed somebody, when he was 18 or 19, and we're making a decision about his character, and he's a bad moral character for the rest of his life. Therefore, we're going to attach this data point to him, and this data point is going to follow him for the rest of his life.
Well, there's a saying in Spanish, and I'll loosely translate it because it's hard to translate Spanish slang, but it basically says necessity and desperation leads to unprecedented times, right? When you need something and you're not able to get it, or you don't have access to it, you go into other ways to try and get it, to your point, right? So like you said, that also goes to anything else, mental health. If you're not getting the medications that you need, or the treatment that you need, or health in general, let's say you're sick and you're trying to, get money to buy your medication. I know a lot of diabetics that can't afford their insulin. So they search for Canada and they fly somewhere else to go get affordable insulin, which is something that they need to live.
Yeah.
So, it's anywhere from, like you said, robbing a bike to trying to get their medication. The criminal system, of course, we know has a lot of holes in it. And I think it's because when it was created, it wasn't created with the people in mind. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like it was created to supposedly protect society, right? That's like their thing. That's their, we're trying to protect society from these, like you said, murderers, robbers, sexual assaults, whatever the case may be. But in there lies what you were saying. There's a big disconnect. Well, why is this happening? Is it circumstances? Is it mental health? Is it desperation? Is it necessity? Like the why, just like anything else, just like in business, just like in medicine, the first thing the doctor says, why is this happening to you? Yep. Let's figure it out. So why aren't we not doing that in every other industry, especially in the legal industry? Why is this happening? Why did they do it? The why is sometimes more important than what was actually done. You see what I'm saying? 100%. If we can rehabilitate these people and provide these resources to begin with, we can prevent so much. And I think this is kind of like the thing of the United States. We don't do preventive anything. We don't prevent anything. We cure everything. We treat everything, but we do not prevent anything, right? Yep. So there's no such thing as when you go to the doctor to prevent an illness. They call it checkups, right? They're like, oh, you're here to check up. No, because God forbid you say, don't you want to know what's going on with your body on, every 6 months, every year, this and that, before something happens, but we don't do that. We don't do that anywhere, like in anything in society. We don't prevent, we don't actually, why are there so many homeless when America has enough money to feed the world? Yep, you see what I'm saying? There's 100%. Just so much, and we have enough resources and enough food. We produce enough food. Literally, we produce enough food in the United States to feed everyone in the world, but we don't. Why? Right? Because we never asked that question. Why? Yep. Why don't we do that? Why? America is great at going to other countries and, helping and lending a hand, but we have issues here too. You know what I mean? Like what's going on over here? Why aren't we taking care of ourselves as well? Like it's kind of like that whole like mom syndrome is what I call it. You know, like moms always like give everything to their children and their husbands and the partners and whatever. They're always giving, giving, giving. And then they're like losing weight, gaining weight, you know, anxiety,
Mhm.
stress, all these other things because they're giving, 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 but they're not taking care of themselves either. Right? You need to take care of yourselves in order to take care of everybody else. But we don't do that, I
We
think.
don't. We don't. And it begins to affect us, you know, as a people, as a unit, right?
Yeah.
You can see how not addressing underlying causes, right, leads to social you know, I would say I won't go as far to say dystopia, but I mean, look at what's happening on a lot of the streets of America now. There is a high rates of mental illness. There is high rates of folks without homes. There are open air drug use. You know, and that's happening not just on, you know, in large metropolitan areas. It's happening in mid-sized and small cities as well,
Oh, absolutely.
small towns as well. And I would venture to say that when people are, there's a call for help,
Hmm.
right? When someone breaks the law or uses drugs or harms somebody or harms himself or harms our community, that's a call for help. You
Absolutely.
know, something happens, something's not right. And instead of, you know, us spending, like in California, it's $50 billion a year on paying salaries, equipment, facilities, pensions. That's what we're paying for. We're not paying to help these people, right? We're paying a, you know, a judge's child's education, which is fine. Like, we need judges. Hey, we need judges. Okay, cool. But how much are we giving all the money towards that? You know,
Hmm.
and then we don't get to the underlying causes, and so we put them in cages, and it exasperates the issue, and they go out, and, you know, things are happening there on the streets. And then when folks don't make it on the street, I mean, when folks happen to, you know, bypass the streets and get back into the community, we create all these barriers because it's data, and it breaks down to the data. I believe that, you know, we are going to experience a jump, and it's going to be leaps and bounds. This is my, you know, thesis.
Prediction.
Yeah, it's my prediction that in the next 2 years, like, America and places around the world are going to experience a huge jump in the way that we use data, right? And
Mm.
it's going to change our lives dramatically, right? Right now, the government uses data in that way, and we're seeing it used. It's happening right now, actually. It's happening, and it's scary that
Yeah, we have
everything that you
ediscovery.
do.
We have a whole private investigative ediscovery within the legal industry. Like there's people solely for those things, you know, where they go in what they call the deep dive research,
Yeah.
right? Where they do the background checks and they, you know, pull the footage and pull this and pull that. And we're thinking we're helping, right? Oh yeah, we got all this great data and we got all this great proof, right? The legal dead stone is proof. We have all this proof that this person legitimately did it. Okay,
Mhm.
but what are we doing to rehabilitate that person? What are we doing to fix these issues? Because with the same data, like you said, we can see how many of these criminals, and I say that with quotation marks for those that are listening, how many of these criminals suffer of mental illness, broken homes, low income communities, access to everything, because we can talk about the rich as well, right? Opioids is a
Mhm.
big thing here
Mhm.
in South Florida or in North Florida. You know, we have the opioid pandemic or pandemia, whatever you want to
Mhm.
call it now. So those are affecting the rich people because they legitimately have access to anything, right? They can
Yeah.
pay for anything. You know, I guess we can, I mean, obviously we can talk about this all day, and it's throughout the entire spectrum, right? It's not
Yep.
only just low income communities or middle class or whatever, you know, the top 3%, whatever you want to call it. We all have, I actually posted about this today. it was a little picture of these two little dogs, and one's a bigger dog than the smaller dog, and they're like, hey, how deep was the mud? And you'll see the mud only a little bit, you know, above the big dog, but the small dog is covered with mud. It's life is all about perspective, right? It doesn't matter how big the mud is, it matters why the mud was there, right? Just to kind of give it a again, going back to the why is this happening? You know, we lose the curiosity spectrum. You know, I'm a mom of two little kids, so I'm re-experiencing the curiosity, right? When they're playing and they're at museums and they're asking, mom, what's this? Mommy, what's that? And they're asking me all these questions because they're honestly legitimately curious, and they want to know the why. And somewhere in life we lose that imagination, we lose that outside the box thinking. You know, my daughter's really good, and we try and do that for her, especially because she's the oldest. You know, she sees no color, no culture, no nothing. Our friends are from different backgrounds. We have literally friends from all around the world. They dress differently, they have different cultures, we attend their religious ceremonies. You know, for her, she's growing up in a world that I grew up in, where we're just one, you know, we're just human, and we search for these commonalities in each other, right? I never look at somebody and immediately say this person is X, Y, and Z. I say, wow, this person has this is amazing, I need this. And you know, and I do that through my business, I do that through life, I do that through my, you know, my family. And I want to, you know, my parents did that to me. You know, we're Puerto Rican, so in Puerto Rico we're called the melting pot of Hispanics because everybody landed on that island. That's why it's called Puerto Rico, the rich port, you know. So it's not just Spaniard, African, and Indian. We have so many other cultures there that live there. We have Italians and Irish and all these other cultures that landed there. And I think having that upbringing and having that kind of vision, right, I know is very uncommon. When we came to the States, I looked at everybody and everybody was, you know, literally divided. Like there was in New York, they had a whole little city, little Italy, and they had, you know, the Irish had their own, and the Jewish, you know, communities, and everything was so divided, and it's just not like the world that I lived in. And I was like, wow, is this really the same thing? You know, like, can I really be that different, and not, and you know, and just be in a different spectrum, you know? Like I don't like to say that I was popular in school. I just knew everybody and I got along with everybody, you know, like I wasn't in this group or that group or whatever. And that's kind of what we need in this world. We need that. We need to start searching for commonalities and continue with the curiosity and continue asking why. But we don't. And you know, most of us, especially you, and that's what I admire about you so much, you work with that. You know, you try. You were telling me before the recording, I think it was a little more than, what was it, 3 legislations, what is it, a day or something like that?
Yeah. So we work in 8 states. So I'm the vice president of one of the largest public policy organizations that work on public safety issues, right? And so that's why I'm always talking about how do we make the system better and serve all of us. And we run about 3 bills in each of those states every single year. So it's about 24 bills we run every single year, 24, you know, bill propositions, 24 champions. And I mean, it's definitely a labor of love. I think one of the last things I'll say is, you know, that like, you know, law, my favorite part of the concept, my favorite part of the founding documents is the Declaration of Independence. I mean, it was a fucking bold document. Excuse my language. It was a bold document. It was a really bold document. I mean, it was great. I mean, to kind of be, and taking for everyone who's like, you know, I know, you know, listen, not everybody's in love with America 100% of the time, but just for the sake of just, you know, level setting here, just imagine you were, you know, back in those times and you felt oppressed by the king or the queen or whatever. Right. And, you know, a group of y'all got together that, you know, they weren't rich. Like it wasn't like,
No.
it was just like normal. It was like normal. I mean, you had some folks with some wealth and some money,
Right.
but
A
it
lot
was
of
like a
gold.
time. Yeah, it was. Yeah, right. But it was a time of like just like it was a very weird time. It was under occupation, you know.
Correct.
And to get together and create a document that says it's our Declaration of Independence, right?
Right.
And knowing that forthcoming is going to be a war and a lot of people are going to die, and to be as bold as possible, and in that document to have the humility to
Right.
say, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all are created equal and are endowed by the Creator certain inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And to uphold these rights, governments are instituted by men, and at any point that these governments become harmful to those means, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and institute new government. So they like to have the humility to say, we're going to set something up, and then at any moment that this thing become, harmful, you can alter or abolish it. And so for people who are like, oh, we got folks who are abolitionists, and that's the wrong, that's far left, that's actually patriotic. It was the most patriotic thing you can do, because the founding fathers basically said, hey, if this thing becomes harmful to any means, not one or two means, but to any means, and if any part of the system, the entire government, becomes harmful to any one person, any group of people, then it is our duty to alter that part or abolish it and institute a new one. And so it is okay to want to change a law. It is okay. Laws were put into place for a particular moment in time, in that for those people. Does not mean that it's just or right. Right. And that's my message to folks listening is, there's this misconception that the law is law, right? It is the final say so. And it's not. The law is guardrails. And we as a people, the people, need to ensure that those guardrails actually still fit who we are. And so it's okay to want to change laws and be aggressive and be innovative, because that's what built this country. And that makes America a great country, because we can change and alter our government and our laws. And that is the most patriotic thing you can do.
Absolutely. I agree. And I apologize for my dog. He's anxious to go out, and he's keeps tapping on my leg, but but yeah, we talked about that too. So before the recording. No, and I totally agree. And not to take away from what you said, because I agree with every single word that you just said. And I admire your boldness, because a lot of people don't have the courage to really state what they mean, right? Everybody's walking on eggshells nowadays, and they're afraid to hurt somebody's feelings or offend them, or it's okay that we disagree with each other. That's the beauty of America, the land of the immigrants, the land of the free. But it's not okay to disrespect or oppress anyone, because at the end of the day, we're all citizens of this great nation, whether it's legal or not, whether you're going through it. Let's not go through immigration. That's a whole different segment, guys. But we live here. We are all striving for the same goal, which is to provide for our families, provide a better life from the one prior to our generations. So at the end of the day, if we can just all work together, and look, we're not going to sing kumbaya, I get it, but if we can all come together and do the commonalities that we can agree upon and make that progress within this lifetime, I think the United States will prosper from that. Both politics, legal, medical, our whole system will like most of our issues can be resolved if we just come together. It's no longer left, right. Let's meet in the middle. I feel like the left and the right is a bridge. If we can just bridge it and come in the middle and just really have conversations just like we're having now, and provide those solutions that you provide on a day-to-day basis. I think America is a great country. I would never, trust me, I visited plenty of other countries. I appreciate, especially as a woman, I appreciate my life here. But I think we can do better. I think we're a nation of greatness, and I think we're a nation that can really, truly be the leaders of the world.
Yep.
So with that note, I appreciate you coming on the Let's Talk Paralegal podcast. And again, I can talk to you all day. You're just an amazing person, a beautiful, beautiful soul. So I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.